This is part 3 of the Craftsman 6x48 Belt Disc Sander Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 2, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be disassembling the motor. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So here we are with the motor, and we're going to remove that support bracket. Those bolts on it are kind of rusted. And there we go. Next, we're going to go ahead and test the motor, make sure that it works. There it is. Turn it off and listen for that click. So we're good to go. Next, we'll remove the pulley. It's just got a set screw. We'll see if it'll slide off of there. Not so much. So we're just going to put a puller on there. And if you do this, just make sure that you don't bend the sheaves on the pulley. This one actually came off pretty easily once we got it going. And there we go. Then we'll remove that key that is on the shaft. So now we're going to remove the motor from the frame. It just has a screw with some square nuts on each end. And then these two little clamps that hook on one end to the frame, and then they screw together and kind of clamp it in place. Pretty standard setup for most motors that have a separate frame. And then we should be able to pull the motor out of the frame. Going to have to help it along there a little bit with some taps. And there's the frame. Next, we're going to remove that capacitor cover and then the capacitor. There's just 2 screws holding it on there. I don't know how brittle these wires are on the inside of the motor right now, so we're being kind of careful with them. We'll just kind of hook that capacitor and try to pry it out of the cover. Sometimes they're in there really tight and sometimes not so much. This one, not too bad. Just looking to see if there's a date on that capacitor. No. Make sure that the capacitor is completely discharged. Then we'll go ahead and disconnect it. These are just blade terminals. So I'm trying to figure out which wire was which now. So now I'm going to mark the capacitor. These probably are not polarized, but I always do this. And then we'll mark each one of those wires so we know where they go. Clean some of that sawdust off of them. So if you're not experienced with electronics and disassembling an electric motor or anything like that, I'm not an electrician, so if you've seen any of my other video series, you know that I pretty much do this same process on every single motor I disassemble. I will mark everything, take reference pictures if necessary. That way when it comes time for reassembly, we should be able to put it back together the way it was when it was working. So now we'll remove the terminal cover, and they're using 2 of the stator studs, those are the long screws, to hold the terminal cover in place. This is one of the progressive things I've seen in motors as I've worked on them, earlier models to later models, that they kind of dual purpose a lot of the components as time went on to cut down, I guess, on cost as well as the complexity of the motor. So removing these 2 stator studs will allow us to remove that terminal cover. One last screw. And there is a wiring diagram on the inside of that terminal cover. So we'll try to preserve that. And then just clean up a little bit of that inside so that we can see what we're dealing with here. So this is the wiring diagram that's in the owner's manual, which is, there's a link to it in the description of the video below. But I'm still going to draw it out because I don't want to get bit on the ass. And this is just something I do with every motor I disassemble. This way, again, I can reassemble it. So as before, we will mark each one of these wires and where they go on the terminal bar. And I normally speed this footage up, but I have had people reach out to me because they couldn't tell what wires went where from the sped up footage, so we won't be speeding it up. It's not overly complicated. This is a fairly simple motor. That's the ground. Then we've got one wire left for the power. And there we go. So we'll go ahead and mark that. And with that out of the way, we've just got two wires left in there. And they are even color coded. Not that you can really tell from the colors because of all the dust on them, but so we'll get those unplugged and then marked. And you can see that I've got the owner's manual there on the left, and I'm comparing that wiring diagram with the one that I'm drawing. Now on the back side of the terminal bar, all of these wires that are attached to the back side of it, they're soldered together. Older motors, you would see them attached by terminal connectors, whether they're ring or blade, but they're all soldered together on this motor, so we won't be really disassembling any of that. Now we'll just remove those last two stator studs. And that one is definitely getting hung up in there. I'm pretty sure these are aluminum. Just a bunch of gunk on it. This one comes out fairly easy if I recall. Alright, so now we'll remove the end frame This is the terminal end, or end shield, as they're called in the parts diagram. And there's enough play in that wiring that we can slip the shield over the rotor. And inside there I can already see there is a washer. They're basically shims to take up play. Then we'll go ahead and pull out those 4 screws that are attaching the thermal protection switch and the terminal bar to the end shield. 2 for each. And like I said, all this wiring on the back side here is soldered in place. Now if we needed to replace any of these lead wires or fix anything there, we could just desolder them and then do what we need to do and then resolder them, but there's no need to do that really. We'll give them a good once over to make sure that they're not cracked or frayed. So there's your end frame or end shield for the terminal end. I believe there was just one shim in there, one washer. We're going to remove that data panel at the end of the video. So here we are on the other end. We'll go ahead and knock that shield loose. See if we can get it off of the rotor. Remember, there's a ball bearing there, and so there we go. We popped it right off. And that is the spring washer, so it goes on this end. And then there are your washers or shims. And there's more than one, which makes sense on this end. So I think that's 2 there, so total of 3 on this end, plus the spring washer. And we're just going to make sure there's no others in there. Kind of hard to tell with that grease. But, yep, I think that's all of them. So now we can remove the rotor. We're just going to tuck those 2 capacitor wires into the stator, and then we can set that aside. So here we are with the centrifugal switch, and it's got 2 springs, 1 on each side. We'll just unclip those. Then it's got the 2 governors. Then there is the plastic sliding ring, but we can't get that off until we get the bearings off. So let's get the bearings off. Again, we're going to use another puller. And I mentioned in the previous videos that we're not sure whether or not we can get these bearings to replace them. So we're going to be taking care not to damage them. Sometimes if you don't get that puller right on the bottom of the bearing, it can press up into the shielding and deform it. And there is a retaining ring that the bearing rests against, so we'll remove that. And then we've got that plastic sleeve for the centrifugal switch. Then we've got the bearing on the other end. Same process. And you can see all of this grease all over the place. Coming from a firearms background, I think lubrication and grease should be done sparingly. And when you slap it on like all this, it's just something for the dirt and dust to adhere to. See if it wants to slide off of there. Probably not. And there was a lot of grease on this motor. Come on. Well, once we get this bearing off, that'll be everything for the rotor. There we go. Well, actually it won't be. We've got that retaining ring that the bearing resides on. Now we're done with the rotor. So here we are with the terminal end frame, and we're going to remove that data panel that has two drive screws that hold it in place. And luckily, the holes for these drive screws are drilled completely through it, so we can just tap them from the backside with a punch. And that will wrap up disassembling the motor. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you got any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget about all the links in the description of the video. In the next video, we will be cleaning all of this stuff. So this rebuild is moving right along. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.